welcome into Offensively Accurate. This is going to be episode number 11. You're probably listening to me right now wondering, what the heck is wrong with this guy? I lost my voice, unfortunately. I'm going to do the best I can to not sound like I'm doing the last podcast with my dying breath. But I yelled a little bit too loud and I lost my voice. So with that aside, we are moving in. I have Donny in here with me. Your opening headline is the best pro-gun ad of all time. Now, you probably haven't seen this. I'd imagine not, because anything good gets commonly suppressed anymore. I'm going to have it pulled it up on screen real quick. We're going to go through the clip in time, but I'd like to go ahead and swing it over to my good friend, Donny. Who are you, good sir? What do you do?
Oh, I am Donny Brooks. I am an aging punk rocker, political junkie. I'm somewhere between libertarian and conservative. I consider myself a sensible libertarian, I guess. They say force is met with resistance. I am that resistance.
We are the resistance. It's better than being the empire, that's for sure. But let's go ahead, guys. We're going to go ahead and get this started. We're going to do our calls to action that I am miserable at. So subscribe to me on YouTube. The channel is Atlas Thugged. Follow me on X if you haven't already. Follow us on Spotify. We have 2 shows. There's Offensively Accurate, and as well as OAD, which is just Offensively Accurate Daily. It's just me doing the daily show with a solo routine, catching you up on news, the common stuff of the day, breaking events. And then share the show if you enjoy it. We put clips out all the time. I try to honestly put out a clip a day. So if you see what you like, go ahead and share it with your friends, especially if you feel like we got a good message going on. But to go with some announcements, nothing in particular. We're still striving to get back to 100 followers on Spotify. We're trying to get that monetized as soon as possible so we can, start investing back into the show. And with that being said, I mean, I talk about Dylan Brewer all the time. I won't pull a tweet up here. But if you can, donate to reach out to Dylan Brewer. Again, he's the Florida kid who was charged for a felony for burning out on a pride flag. He needs all the help he can get. It looks like Ron DeSantis is going to actively ignore this until it's resolved. So any donation would help this kid out. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with this. So you probably haven't seen it already, but you see it on this clip here. I said it was easily the best pro-gun ad I'd ever seen. And I said, notice which party he affiliates with, the klansmen, because it might catch most people off guard. But let's go ahead and play it, and then I would like to get Donny's opinion of it right after.
Democrats like to say that no one needs an AR-15 for self-defense, that no one could possibly need all 30 rounds. But when this rifle is the only thing standing between your family and a dozen angry Democrats in Klan hoods, you just might need that semi-automatic and all 30 rounds.
And that is a beautiful ad, man. So, Donny, what are your thoughts on this ad that you just saw?
I love it. His back must hurt from carrying around those huge balls, because the fucking nuts it takes to put out a video like that, they must be gigantic. He needs a special tailored pants, guaranteed it.
What I thought was cool about it was he's got like this Idris Elba kind of look. Like he's like that classic James Bond black man, like very, very eloquent. And just to have the shades on, dude. What's cool is I didn't notice the donkey insignia until like the second time I had watched it. So they're like really pushing this. These are Democrat klansmen. And it's just...
Oh, it's the truth. They started the Klan.
And that's right. People forget the term Dixiecrats, I mean, well, honestly, you have a better grasp of the party switch than I could probably tell right now. You want to give people an idea of what they mean by the party switched a long time ago relative to the slavery and Dixiecrat and Jim Crow?
Well, any time you argue with the leftists, they'll tell you the party switched when you start talking about, well, the Democrats formed the KKK, and the KKK, most people think their number one objective was, let's damage the black community, but actually number one was to damage the Republicans, because the Republicans believe all men are created equal, which was very much against obviously what Democrats and the KKK thought. So the KKK's enemy number one wasn't black people, it was Republicans. Now, anytime you argue with a leftist, which I do all the time, they're going to tell you that the party switched, and you say, okay, well, explain that to me. Explain the party switch, and they'll say Southern strategy, and they'll tell you to Google it. But as far as I could tell, the parties haven't switched. The Democrats have just found new ways to manipulate people that they don't like.
And it's been one of those things, like, I like to kind of contribute these things to like the big lie. I always kind of defer to that because there's so many things like this that go under the radar that are just like generally accepted, even though they're entirely flagrantly false. And that's one of those things that gets taught, in high school. Like, high schoolers are taught that the parties flip with really no substantial argument behind it besides the ethos of the history
Nobody's
teacher.
taught how.
Exactly.
I've asked people on both sides, like, explain this to me. And I've tried to look it up, and there isn't a reasonable argument. They just wanted to distance themselves from being the party of the KKK. And it's interesting because Lyndon B. Johnson famously said, we'll have these N-words voting for Democrats for the next 100 years. So even that far back as to LBJ, they were still the party of racism. And they just figured out how to sell it to the people that they hate, which is kind of genius if you think about it.
It's genius because it kind of follows that same logic of like, what is a woman? It's like that circular logic. Well, it was told to me. But this is almost even less so because you can just go to a history book and you can just be like, where do they switch? There's nothing here on paper. But then you have...
You'll find information about the parties having switched, but you won't find any information about how did that happen.
Yeah, or even like which members switched, right? Like which
What
great...
does that even mean?
Exactly. And it's just a way to kind of, shuffle everything under the big scary rug that is white supremacist Republicans. It's a sad, flailing attempt to kind of put more negative connotation into the Republican Party, right? Like, we never had any onus of slavery. We were never them. And it's like, the reality is it's never changed. They've always been the racist ones. And they've just finding new evolutionary ways to be more racist. It's kind of wild.
Yeah, and when you look up the history of the Republican Party was basically created to oppose slavery. The Democrat Party had created the KKK, so it's very convenient for them that they can just say, well, the party switched. I don't know when, I don't know how, I don't necessarily even know what the party switched means, but I've been told that. So you're the racist one, not me. That's basically the argument from anybody you talk to.
And it's just ignorant, but then at the same time, when you're arguing with these leftists, you kind of, at least for me, I get to a point where, once I get to like the fifth definition that we don't even agree on, I find it nearly impossible to even further engage in an argument because we can't even define basic terms. Like, if we can't even both agree on the reality that the parties never switched, well, then it's hard to really argue much anything beyond that, particularly when it comes to like historical perspective regarding the parties.
Well, and like I said, that LBJ quote, that wasn't before they said the party switched. That was long after they claimed that the parties somehow just traded all their beliefs. So clearly, Democrat leadership didn't change their opinions, even if the party switched. Like, and the fact that they had a plot to get these people to vote for them for the next 100 years, and since then they've kind of lived up to that promise. I think only now are Black people starting to catch on to like, wait, these people have run our cities for hundreds of years. They haven't gotten better for us. They've gotten far worse.
Yep.
Why are we still voting for them?
Well, I think one of the best things that have come from it is the fact that there's been a good portion of Black men in particular that have realized, gun reform entirely is essentially really targeted at minors. And when, you go to the lengths of like what we have on screen here, which is, and what would seem entirely delusional to someone who believes all of the lies that the left kind of tells them, if you're listening to MSN or MSDNC, right? But what's riveting is seeing, organically Black men slowly coming to the realization with the help of people like Maj Touré, seeing that if you honestly understand, or if you honestly believe that, policing is entirely, systematically racist towards minorities, then what would you have to gain by allowing them to further restrict your rights to own firearms? And so when you kind of put that logic there, it's really like, it doesn't make sense, even if you believe all of the leftist rhetoric. It goes back to the fact of, even if you think, everything the left says about police, they hate you, it's all just deeply rooted in racism, and that's why the incarceration rates are the way they are. Well, then how would it make sense then that you would want to keep taking guns out of black men's hands if they're seemingly always killed unarmed? And so like the logic just falls flat on its face.
Well, I mean, they're actively damaging the community, but telling the community that they are the champions for them, right? Like, and all of the strategy that they seem to have in keeping these people on board, at least for the last few decades, have been like, oh, we'll give you free money, we'll give you free stuff. Those things usually do end up damaging the community more than helping them. But you brought this up on the last show, a lot of people see, oh, number higher, good. I have more money now. That must be good. And not even in the short run, that must be good in the long run because I have more money in the short run.
Yeah.
Right. And I think now that Black people are starting to wake up, the Black community is starting to say, hey, we've been voting for these people for a long time. They're only making our neighborhoods unsafer. They're damaging us. Maybe we should start voting for Republicans. And then once you see that shift start to happen, you can really understand why Democrats are pushing so hard to bring in illegal immigrants, give them housing loans, give them the ability to vote, give them the ability to work, because now they're losing that demographic and they need to replace them.
Yeah, right. I can't remember the specific percentage that was said, if Democrats ever fall under this specific percentage of retaining the Black vote, then they're bound to lose. It's it's like a 95% or higher chance that they will lose if they lose this significant portion of the Black voting bloc, which most polling data would tell you they've already crossed that threshold where they've lost too much of a percent of the Black vote to where it's seemingly looking like it will be a landslide Republican. And, you would go back to like the damaging the community aspect. Like, honestly, one of the most damaging things I think that damages the Black community is like the people who are on The View. Like further like exemplifying what we had just said, which is like number go up must mean good. And what these people seem to have in common is they can't understand like second level and third level consequences to any kind of contextual prescription or solution. It's again, they just see a big positive and that's all they can kind of break down from it. It's like, wow, that must be good.
Well, and even some of the policies that they're saying we're doing this to help you are kind of racist, like just blatantly racist. Like, we're going to get you into schools that you probably won't be successful at. We're going to get you jobs that you're probably not qualified for and probably won't excel at. These things sound like gifts, but they are damaging. Like, you're better off going to a school where you're going to excel than going to a school that's 9 times more expensive that you're going to fail at.
Yeah.
Right. And then you also see them being like, well, we'll reform crime by letting criminals out of jail. Well, what is the implication there? Are you implying you're helping Black people because they're criminals and you're going to let criminals out? So like, even if you believe in the whole party trade-off where they just traded their beliefs, like, I mean, the policies they're talking about now, the welfare state that incentivized Black women to get fathers out of the home has done irreparable damage.
I mean, it's not even, at this point, it extends well beyond just, minority families. I know, and honestly, let me take this to a different tangent, really. I'll put a pin in what I was going to say. Because me and you both can sit here and agree, that the Black community has definitely had damage done to it by outside forces with things outside of their control. I can sit here and say, like, there have been bad actors who have, whether it was legislation or whether it was activism, doing as much as they could to ensure, and this is including violence as well, but ensuring that like, the black community is like denigrated from the inside out and from the outside. Like it's just, but my point is this, with how bad diversity has gone, with the pendulum swinging, do you think there can ever really be us going back to kind of adding nuance to being like, okay, maybe there should be some minute level of affirmative action to help balance out the damage done? Or has it gone too far to where it's like we have to scrap everything and we go back to everyone's equal opportunity and no one gets affirmative action? What's your thought on that?
I don't think anybody should get it. I don't want it. Like if you're suggesting because we've done this so long for the black community and now that we've put them in these places, should we now do affirmative action for white people? No, just stop doing it.
Right.
Just stop doing it. If there is a special law for a special group, I don't want it. I don't want it for that group. Don't want it for my group either. The LGBT hate laws, with the gay KK or gay, as you put it. Like those are special laws for special people. Affirmative action, special laws for the black community. I think maybe we just get rid of all the special laws for special people and we go back to where all Americans are living under the same laws that are built to apply to all of us.
And I agree with everything you say.
I don't want to see it done for me or them.
And I agree. Like even as much as I can
and I also just made the argument that it's damaging. So wouldn't it be silly if I said, affirmative action is damaging, let's do it to white people?
Yeah, right. No, and that's the thing though. It's like I don't want any amount of affirmative action. I agree with you. I guess I'm more so wondering how do we break this, or I guess bring this back? Because I see honestly a really hard position in the black community where like they are reparations or else. And so I'm, even with all of this, diversity blowing up in people's faces, how do you think we can kind of walk that back? I just find it a hard thing to navigate because these people are very dead set on the fact that they have been wronged and that they are owed. And when people are in that position, I feel like that's one of like the hardest positions to negotiate from the other side of the table.
I think reparations are crazy. I think it's crazy. I'm Irish. My parents, my great grandparents immigrated here, so I wasn't here for slavery. Why am I going to pay out? When my great grandparents got here, there was Irish need not apply signs everywhere. Am I going to get reparations?
No, not a chance.
They've done this thing where they've said all white people are just white people, but that's not true. Some of us are French, some of us are English.
Mm-hmm.
I'm mostly Irish. Not all black people are black people. Some of them are from Africa. Some of them are from Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica. Not everybody that is black deserves reparations, and not everybody that is white owes those reparations. First off. And second off, if you literally cannot go throughout history to right all the wrongs. We can only right the ones moving forward and the ones that are happening right now. It's ridiculous to go back into the past and try and fix things. We use the past to fix the future. We don't go into the past to fix things.
Correct. I mean, like, and I'm with you, dude. Like, I honestly think if there was really, I think, dude, even if any, like one single state that ever got halfway through tabling a bill that was, implying some kind of reparation or implying some kind of white tax, like, I think that's instant civil war at that point. You're not going to, especially in such a drowned out economy, you're not going to get, people will just stop paying their taxes. They will refuse to give up their money for things like that. And then you would end up having to force, the legal enforcement side of that. And I agree with you entirely. Like, it's just a ridiculous idea to make people pay for the sins of their fathers. Whichever way that goes around, right? Like whether it's, vice versa for victim or for oppressor. But you touched on something really poignant there, which I don't think people often talk a lot about, which is like, America has become white and black, where previously it was like, this guy's from Egypt, this guy's from Jordan, this guy's from, Zimbabwe or Trinidad, as you'd put it. And then, white people are from Spain, or we're from France, or from Italy. But that's like non-existent in America. This like disconnected heritage particularly in the black community, where like they don't really even have a good idea of where their heritage may even come from, even more so than what it affects, white America. So it kind of hardens their roots in the fact that they're black American with really no other root outside of that.
It's funny you brought up The View earlier, which is funny because I can't remember her name, but one of the black ladies that's not Whoopi Goldberg was on The View, and she found out that her ancestors. She's demanding reparations. Then she finds out her ancestors were slavers, and they were such prolific slavers that when slavery became illegal, they took their slaves and fled to a place where they could still be slavers. She knows that, finds that out, and even after finding out that piece, still at the end of the segment says, "Oh, I'm still for reparations. You still owe me money." I think you owe us money now. Like
Yeah,
you're
right.
the slaver. Like your ancestors were the problem. Mine were just got here. They were on a boat. They couldn't find work. They were indentured servitudes. Why do I owe you money if your ancestors were slavers?
It's a good thing you bring that up. I wasn't at is it a Joe? No, not Joe Behar. Man, I know
What about
exactly
the
who you're talking
Chinese that
about.
got here and they were forced to build our railroads? Like they're saying, oh, black people deserve reparations and only black people, and they deserve it from white people. But it's funny because, you're finding out all these black people that are saying they deserve reparations have family that were the perpetrators of slavery, not necessarily just the victims.
And it just, but you had even said it, right? Like she's going through it like on live television, seeing all of these facts laid out. And she's like, well, I'm black, so I'm still for reparations. It's like, how do you default to that after going through all of that history? And again, because it's not about the truth. It's about pushing an agenda. And again, these people, especially, I would consider everybody on The View as a bad faith actor. I don't think any of them are particularly inclined to believe the things that they actually say that come out of their mouths. And it goes back to damaging the black community. These are the thought leaders for a lot of people who, are, not entirely involved in politics, but I imagine most people catch clips of The View very often, whether it's because they're being outright praised for something they said, or they're being outright shamed for some kind of delusional thing they might have, put forward. And it sucks because you had even made this point to me too, which is like, how do we as like white men enter into that arena and try to even garner as shepherds and try to point the black community in the right direction? Which you had kind of said that, you had kind of offered the idea, which is like, it's not on us. Like it's not, it's kind of out of our hands. It's going to be incumbent upon the leaders in the black community. And I honestly kind of agree with you. The only thing that I kind of would maybe have a hesitation there was because when we had that, I'd kind of thought of like MLK. And like, I know everybody's not a big fan of MLK. I'm kind of neutral on him, to be honest. But he clearly was he was a leader who spoke, he spoke actively and outward to the white community because it was going to take someone to cross that bridge and be able to, bring unity between the communities. So I think there is some truth to what you're saying. And maybe it's just the fact that maybe neither me or you are the iconic enough to be that person. But I see Donald Trump as being someone who can be as iconic as someone like MLK, who can kind of bridge that gap and bring unity to the communities.
Well, let's kind of break that down a little bit because that was a conversation we had off camera. So basically the conversation was to convert people politically. You don't focus on the sheep, you focus on the people shepherding the sheep, right?
Right.
That doesn't necessarily mean black leadership, but basically the conversation was about how do we convert those shepherds. And kind of my point is the black community is unique and they don't have any interest in being converted by a white shepherd, right? Me,
Yeah.
my political opinion isn't tied to my skin color or my race at all. I'll listen to anybody that I like their opinion. They typically want to hear about the problems in their community from people that look like them, and I understand that. I get
Right.
that.
Right.
I don't necessarily think it's black leadership, because when I say shepherds, I'm not necessarily talking about the people in charge. I'm talking about the people that obviously they do have influence, but people like you and me that are kind of breaking these things down and saying like, hey, it's not what it looks like, it's not what they said it is. And do I think it's impossible for them to listen to somebody else? No, but I do think if you want to talk about things like, the crime aspect, the gang aspect, fathers not being in homes, things like that, I do think you get a lot more credit from that community if you're a part of it.
And and that's also to go to the fact that like we are two entirely different communities. So it would make sense that like we're not going to have the same hierarchical responses and influences, because we're not a one for one, right? There are some differences between how our communities and cultures have kind of fostered themselves. And I honestly, I agree and like almost entirely with everything you're saying. I see somebody like Donald Trump who's clearly, grabbing with influence, being able to mend those bridges. Although it's not like he's even, directly speaking to the black community. It's that what he's doing is shining through. And maybe it's even more so, particularly the fact that with all of the indictments going against him, and that being something that like the black community has been harping on for a long time, which is just unfair punishment, unfair extortion, unfair arrest, unfair incarceration. And then when they see the former president, who they all kind of have been told the entire time, like, you have to hate this person because he hates you, but they see him go through kind of a similar BS situation that they can very easily imagine themselves being in, is them being like, okay, I can relate with this guy, even though he's not my skin color. The story is so viral and large now that like, I see what this dude's going through and I can get behind that. And I think that's great. And I think we honestly need more of that. But I don't want more Trump cases though at the same time.
No, and I do agree, but I think in this case it's probably the exception and not the rule. I think generally speaking, that community just takes criticism better from people that are in it. I do think they're starting to come around. I actually thought it was crazy that they convinced all these people that they hated Trump, because black people used to love Trump, and then he ran for president, and
Yeah.
Democrats are like, oh, you don't like him anymore, and they were like, oh, I don't like him anymore. And now like
Mhm.
you have older people being like, oh, Trump was like hanging out with all the big celebrities in the 80s, like he clearly doesn't hate black people. I think, was it who was it? He backed Al Sharpton's campaign. Was it Al Sharpton?
It might have been. He did run earlier on. I know he ran this year, but he definitely ran a period before this.
Yeah, I want to say that he endorsed Al Sharpton's like campaign in the 90s. I might be getting the person wrong. I
Let's
can't
look this up.
remember off the top of my head. But it's just like historically, you could just go look up and see like this guy doesn't hate black people. Like, so I'm not really sure how they convinced black people that they didn't like Trump. But I mean, they did the same thing with Mitt Romney. They were saying Mitt Romney's going to put you in chains. He's like
Yeah.
like the most milk toast wet bag that's ever lived, and they say that he has an extreme opinion, and then people just believe it. But he was like the most boring dude that's ever been alive, policy wise. He was wet toast.
I mean, he was literally like a policy away from being Obama. There was really not much that kind of separated those guys. They really weren't even having debates. They're kind of just shaking each other's hands and being like, well, let the best man win, because they're both uniparty.
It's funny because they always, anytime there's a Republican candidate, you'll hear, oh, they're going to put you back in chains. But like we just discussed, the Republicans got them out of chains. Democrats were the ones that were fighting for them to be in chains. But they can use this playlist. Every time a Republican is up, they say he's going to put you back in chains, and people buy it, even though it's never once been true.
And the reality is, though, that's more of a mechanism of the fact that they have gotten the groupthink collectivism, tied with the social fear of the consequences of being excluded or being in the out group. And it's got a real grasp on people. And that's just not the Black community. That's all communities. Like there is a hard FOMO type grip around most people who just refuse to step away from the herd. And that's not, I mean, that is every group. And I think honestly, where I see it most affected is not even the Black community. I see it with like the all female community. That's where I really can see like this collectivized singular one opinion that we all hold in the female community the most. And it's just kind of, or maybe you disagree.
I think most of leftism is like that, right? Because what they did was they said they took a bunch of communities that are not related, don't have similar interests, like the Black community and the gay community, and they said, hey, you guys are on the same team now because they're both marginalized. Even though you're not similar, you probably don't connect with them, but they're your allies now. So you have to back them and they have to back you. But again, not similar interests, right? So they took a bunch of groups like that. They said, you are marginalized. We're on team marginalized. And if you don't agree with the opinion of team marginalized, well, you got to get out. So
you're a white supremacist.
So I think they're all kind of like that. I mean, on the right, like me and you, we disagree on plenty of things,
Right.
and neither of us has been like, well, you're not on my side, or like started screaming insults at each other, because
Like
on our
supremacists.
unlikely allies, are allowed to have differing opinion. On that side, they have unlikely allies, but they're not allowed to disagree with their allies.
And it's cool because it shows that there is clearly room for discourse on one side, where there's zero room for discourse on the other side. But what would you say unites our group is the fact that we can agree on objective reality. That is really the shining light that kind of unites anyone's right of a progressive. And we see all of these Overton window shift memes where it shows how the left just keeps running and running and running. And then they point over to everybody else and they're like, what have you done? Look how far away you guys are. And then convincing somehow most everyday people that the right is the group that has just been going off the hinges and been getting even more and more racist as time has gone on. Meanwhile, our schools are inundated with extreme anti-white rhetoric, affirmative action, out the huzzah. It doesn't even matter. Like high schools now having segregated, different team activities. And somehow, some way, they can pull this wool over everybody's eyes and be like, oh no, but it's those guys who are the bad ones. It's just this, it's so nonsensical. And what makes it easy for people to come to our side is when they finally do see a crack in the armor, it's so apparent that they can't do anything besides be like, I'm an idiot. Like, wow, was I dumb? And you get that a lot from people who have walked away from being a Democrat, like similar to like Brandon Straka and his walk away campaign. A lot of those people are like, dude, how was I so dumb?
So I left early enough that I didn't feel dumb, but like I don't think those people are dumb. I think they're uninformed, and we've talked about how people that back in the day, to be informed, you were one of those guys that sat around and you watched the news all day, and you knew what was going on in the world because of that. And very quickly it switched on those people to where you're watching the news all day. You're not learning the truth. You're being brainwashed and indoctrinated to have these opinions. So I don't think those people are dumb. Like I said, a lot of them were probably trying to be as informed as possible. But when your authorities kind of just lie to you, that's big for a lot of people, because a lot of people don't know how to do the research on their own. A lot of people aren't great at telling when they're being lied to. And a lot of people that are smart people are looking for some kind of authority on the topic to get their information, which was the news. So I definitely don't see those people as dumb. Like we've talked about, we enjoy swimming in the sewers. That is politics. We are
Yeah.
sewer divers. I don't expect everybody to be like that. It's gross. There's shit
No.
everywhere. Why do you want to do this? So
Eh,
I don't think those people are dumb.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I
I guess
think
let me walk it back.
we're just crazy enough to enjoy the filth, you know, which just makes us more informed than them.
No, right. Let me walk it back. So yeah, I mean, well, okay, I'll walk it back a little bit. I think there are a lot of
Well, you
dumb
didn't
people
say
in
they
that
were dumb
movie.
either. You just were saying that a lot of them felt dumb.
Yeah.
So you don't need to walk it back because you didn't say they were dumb either. But
Well, no,
go
I
ahead.
guess. Well, I want to walk back and clarify because I will say I do think that there are very retarded people that are on the left, but I don't think it's most of them. I think that's generally the screaming, reaching minority. But what I will say is like when people say that, when they say they felt dumb, it's more akin to the fact of like, how was I not thinking deeper about this at any point throughout this? You know, it's more so like they have that epiphany where they never thought critically about the things they were saying. Not that they're dumb themselves, but that like, why didn't I take the extra step to really analyze why I believed these things and why I said these things? But I do find there to be some very ignorant people. I mean, they're on both sides. We can agree to say that there are some very ignorant redneck hillbilly dudes who will never change their opinion on the black community, who will never back down on basic basic the South will rise again kind of principles, and you'll have that, right? But to act as if like that, it has the power that these people claim to say that it does, is just, it's wild,
I
because
think
it's
that's
like,
more of a stereotype. The redneck South will rise again. Like
right,
even when you're in the South, you don't see that. And there's another lie that the left created. They created this lie that racists are hiding everywhere. But I've met real racists in my life. Not only are they happy to tell you that they're racist, the hardest part is to get them to shut up about why they're racist.
yeah,
Racists aren't hiding everywhere. They'll fucking happily tell you that they're racist, and they'll give you a rundown of their whole life and how they got there.
come here, boy.
So, the whole redneck, the South will rise again. Like, I think that's a stereotype. Most rednecks I meet they're basically dirty hippies.
Right, that was
With
my
bigger
point. Like
trucks.
they don't
Like,
exist IRL. Like if you just go outside and
they
touch
don't.
grass, like where are these people? But they got the mass
They don't
majority to
exist.
believe it.
I mean, you'll still find Southerners with, the Confederate flag. You'll find them talking about the Civil War and calling it the War of Northern Aggression.
Yeah.
But that's more of them trying to like stick to their heritage. I don't think they're saying that slavery was a good thing. I think it's that, Southerners have a lot of pride in being Southerners. And you'll find that they also think Northerners have a lot of pride in being Northerners. But it's just a Southern thing.
It was cool. It's like, yeah, I'm glad you gave that description because like I gotta be honest, I grew up in a rural area in Ohio. I have very well acquainted with some very open racists, and it is literally 99% of the time that is exactly how they carry themselves. They are proud to be that, and they don't care what anyone has to say about it. And I honestly think those people, to be like that, you have to have a certain level of arrogance to hold those opinions in the first place. So it makes sense why they would then be arrogant about their espousing of those opinions, because you'd have to be a narcissist, psychologically to hold these positions. And
I mean, not really. Like I said, I've heard some of their stories on why they're racist. A lot of times it's an individual hurt me, or several individuals hurt me, and now I'm skeptical about a whole race of people. That's a lot of times that's a story. I mean, sometimes you'll find, the more politically inclined racists that want to talk about crime statistics and things like that, which I don't think is inherently racist, by the way. I'm just saying they talk about it too.
yeah,
But like I said, they're not hiding. The left is convinced, everybody that like everybody on the right is racist and they're just hiding it. But like again, these people will tell you. They'll tell you that, and there's signs. They can't wait to talk about it most of the time, in my experience. I've worked in kitchens and construction. There's a lot of people that have, done time in those industries.
Yeah.
And you'll find those people that are openly racist and will tell you about it. I mean, they exist. They are out there. Very few and far between. Not hiding at all.
Yeah, no,
They're just like us. They want to tell people their opinions about the world just like we do.
right, because they hold it with fervor because they think it's the right one to have and they want to spread it to other people. The only caveat I would add in there was I think even more so than the individual experiences, I do agree that I think that's commonly like an individual, like a young formative experience, just making you carry a weight of opinion against an entire group of people. But I've also seen it where the fact is by proxy of the family holds these values. And so because the father, the head of the household and the mom agrees, and it's like, he's making 4 jokes about black people a day. He throws the hard R. And then next thing you know, all 3 of those boys getting raised by this dad are saying the exact same things. They're walking the exact same walk, and it spreads that way too. So I think the individual instances, I'm actually more understanding of because I can see why if you experience something so egregious, your psychology would kind of, lean towards holding that opinion. But when it's just you grow up and your family just says it and you don't have any other reason to say it because your dad was saying it, it's like, did you really think about why you believe those things?
Okay, but I'm going to play devil's advocate here a little bit. So,
Okay.
Both of us, our politics were hugely influenced by our dads.
Right.
Right. And we were lucky that they weren't crazy psycho racists, right? Because we didn't end up like that.
Right.
But it's hard for me to not understand how, when you're a kid, your dad is your hero. You don't know that adults are, sometimes monsters. You don't know that they're adults. You think they've got it all figured out. And I can definitely understand how if you grew up in a house like that, hearing those things all the time would start to affect you. It's the same kind of brainwashing everybody else is going through, but it's done by somebody that you love, right?
Yeah.
And if the brainwashing is so effective on Twitter by strangers, then, I'm not going to hate on the people that got brainwashed by people that they loved and trusted and were supposed to take care of them.
Yeah, no, it's
my dad was a
understandable.
huge influence in how I think politically. And again, I'm just glad he wasn't a crazy person.
Right. No, I see what you're saying because like the reason I'd even be like as angled as I am to having my ear to politics is entirely because of my father. So even without that influence, I wouldn't even be anything close to what I am today, especially if you removed all of that political, orientation and just like all of the little lessons and the examples and explaining to me what that, 5-minute clip of Glenn Beck was in 2004. Like, what was he screaming about? Because I didn't understand. Like, all of those things have led to me having the hard political stances that I do because I was very involved in with them. So I agree. My point was more so, even at that though, I think every kid still has like the rebellious stage where they kind of go through a period where
Some
they're
of
like,
us never grow out of it.
right. But where you become adjacent to all of your values because it's just a natural thing a teenager does. Not all of them, but it's a very typical trope. And when I think about that, I think, well, wouldn't most people going through the rebellious stage kind of be hard stanced against their parents with those kinds of racist beliefs? And then you would think like it would kind of extend to the fact that every social institution from school to all the way up to your federal government is also saying, racism bad. It's kind of, to me, you got to have a real amount of arrogance to carry that opinion through those stages, through all of the institutional. And I'm not even going so far as to agree with what the institution puts out, but to then hold it through that opinion, through the social environment we have. I think then you get to the year 25 years old in 2024 and you're racist. It's like, okay, you have taken this position for a clear reason, and it's not out of good faith. And I guess that's kind of where I hold my stance at. But I guess
Yeah, I mean, true. I would say that maybe during their rebellion phase, they should have figured it out. But also, one of the things the left did was convert all the rebel counterculture movements, right? Punk rock is like, I'm the outcast for being like a, not even like like I'm politically unlovable for being so reasonable, in my opinion, right?
yeah,
Like, I'm
right.
not really to either end of the extremes. Like, I'm a radical centrist. So the fact that I got kind of exiled, and I'm around people in the punk rock community that think like I'm less part of the community because of my political beliefs. But they did that to everybody, and the way that they did that
Hmm.
was converting those subcultures through the things that those subcultures agree on, right?
Yeah,
Music, movies. They did it to the punk rock called subculture, which would have, you would think, would be like the first people against all of this.
right.
But they also did it to the hip hop culture, and convinced them that they all hated Donald Trump, even though before he ran for president, they couldn't stop putting his name in their songs.
Yeah,
So, I mean, I think by controlling Hollywood, they did a good job of convincing these counterculture type subcultures to be on their side before they really started pushing how crazy they wanted to get.
I kind of
If
view
that makes
this.
sense.
It does because I kind of view this akin to the way they hollowed out the middle class, where they're hollowing out the middle. They want the center position to be void, right? It's like take a hard stance. Oh, man, I shouldn't have yelled. They want you to take a hard stance, right? Like it's like being in the center is where they don't want you to be. Because as we had a conversation off air, which is like if you're in the center, you can view everything. You have the best viewpoint of both sides from the center. And that's why they don't want you to be there. Because if you were in the center, well, for one, it shows you have enough self-agency to not be involved entirely or align yourself with the political movement. But two, you're in the crux position where you can see the gradients as they get further out. So it allows you to see the spectrum the best from the middle because you can see how far it goes. And when people take these center positions, you come akin to where you can see where you're on, you're on my show because you can see when you look to your right, you're like, okay, I can see this guy and this guy. But then you look to your left and you're like, oh my gosh, like that brother is 4 miles all the way down there. He's in the Walmart. I can't even see this guy. And so from the center, you realize like, okay, like the radicalness becomes much more apparent that it's very existent on one side and non-existent on the other.
That, and I would add that the thing they're probably even more worried about than that, about people being in the center, is that the center doesn't give government power. No centrist is arguing that the government needs more power to control people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? If you go too far left, government gets power to control people. If you go too far right, government gets power to control people, right? So the center position is where they don't gain any power, right? Because if the leftists that are in charge now had their way, they would be, jailing people for hate speech and giving the government power to do that, and giving the government power to jail people for free speech. But if you go too far to the right, you're giving the government power to, get rid of degenerate music and videos, and trying to clean up things that they find distasteful. So I think the center they fear the most, because if people are in the center, they don't get power,
Yeah,
like at all. The people get the power there.
right. And then that's what they fear the most.
They don't want that. Yeah, no.
Don't let people govern themselves, dude. Like we need to keep this bureaucratic deep state system. But it's kind of go ahead. I'm gonna pull it back to the gun ad because I did want to actually put on for this guy. I'm gonna actually go back to my screen here because I wanted to actually give this guy some airtime. I don't even think we said his name. It's Jerone Davison for Congress. He's a former NFL player. He was played for the LA Rams. I didn't know that. I don't really know who he is. He might have just played on a rookie contract and was one and done. That's probably the case. But he's probably clearly got some masculine values. and he's running for election to the U.S. House to represent Arizona's 4th congressional district. So if you like what you saw, support this guy. Obviously, only do so if you are well aware of his other positions. I'm not entirely familiar with who this guy is, so I say that with a grain of salt. Be sure to look into this kid, or this guy, before you make any hard, judgment passes, or before you donate $100 even. And now we're at the midway point. I'm going to bring up the sponsor here too. The sponsor for today's show is my first and only sponsor, the Mean Tweets. They are a conservative and mega apparel clothing company. Again, they have phenomenal work ethic. It's essentially a guy and his wife doing everything with a printing press from themselves out of their house. It is the Mean Tweets. They run it through a Shopify account, and the promo code REDPILL10 gets you 10% off. It also helps me as well. I commonly like to bring this one up too. Bats for Maps. Like, I went onto their page the other day. I said this probably like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was like the first thing I saw, and I was like, "This is perfect." And I know Donnie would love this. We share very similar opinions when it comes to maps. And if you're not familiar with maps,
I like the idea. I personally think we should still call them pedophiles.
Same. We shouldn't be using their language. Bats for pedophiles. That's actually a better t-shirt.
I love the idea of the shirt, but I wish it said like pedos get the rope or something. I don't want to call them maps.
I know, because that plays into the language. But anyways, if you do want to support me and you like their apparel, the best way I can sell it to you is, if you don't enjoy confronting people with your political opinion, what better way to get your point across and put it on a t-shirt? So with that, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next ridiculous topic, which is, and let me go ahead and give you a warning, guys. It's not going to be for everybody, nor is it going to be really truly family friendly as we dive into this topic. This is from Chaya Rychek. I have it on screen here. I didn't want to play the video because the videos just makes me very uncomfortable. I'm going to just read her tweet. It is a massive cover-up in the toe-sucking video. There was a high school that ran an event, and it was to donate to, I believe it was some kind of diversity and inclusion, affirmative action. I believe it was for some kind of disabled charity. Irrelevant. They had 9th graders through 12th graders at this DC school, and then it was in Oklahoma, suck and lick toes of the teachers for money. I cannot really explain this to you any other way than the way I just said it. It's one of the most egregious, ridiculous things I've seen in a long time. I'm glad that she actually quoted this. This is the video. Trigger warning before I ever play this. I'll give you guys a couple seconds to click off if you don't want to watch this. Just for anybody who's watching it now or in the future, I will play this. And it was done so in the same format. These kids would like to do like any kind of fundraiser games. Commonly you would see them, popping balloons on chairs. And for whatever reason, this school decided we're going to make 9th graders lick, our middle-aged teachers' toes. And so this is the video.
He is devouring those.
I really don't think we need to see much more of that. You can see clearly with the kid yelling in the background, the desensitization and the normalization of how sexual our culture has become. He's just yelling like he's devouring them, because the kids, and I don't expect most kids to have a good understanding, nor do I expect them to like stand up for themselves and say, no, we don't want to do this. But man, how far has the West fallen? Like, just take that image in for a second and think, is there any reason you would send your child to a school when they openly have committed pedophilic acts in public view and it's been recorded? I'm glad that they used the censoring and blurred out all these kids' faces. Good on them, whoever did that. But this is at 35 million views, and it's been about 2 days. Now I want to go ahead and let Donnie give his opinion on this, because I know he feels about the exact same way as I do.
Yeah. I guarantee that if this happened at one of my kids' schools, Mean Tweets would be selling one of those shirts, and these teachers would see me in the parking lot. I promise. if I found out what is happening here. Is Dan Schneider the principal of this school? Like,
Oh
who
gosh.
who thought this was okay?
And here's the thing
This is a
though.
crime, as far as I'm concerned.
What's crazy is as I read into it, so I have the Oklahoma Fox article pulled up here. And as I read through it, they give their statement. We can get back to that. I want to pull it up here because there were parents who disagreed. I'm going to highlight it here. This is the parent who spoke, and they didn't give out any identities, I don't believe. I think they're kind of hiding most people's identities, and for good reason. She said, whenever she told me yesterday that was happening, I had to ask her, wait, what? They're licking peanut butter off of toes, an anonymous parent said. What? So it's good to see that there was some parents who were like blatant, openly like, WTF. But it clearly wasn't enough for the event to still happen. I can't even imagine the fact that they sent like a newsletter out or something like that people knew in advance and they still allowed this to happen. This goes in line with the fact of, they have these sex parades with, 64-year-old men, riding nude on their bicycles in front of kids. It's another element that like we already have laws on the books for these kinds of instances. So ask yourself, why are they not being enforced? And I'm right there with you, Donnie. Like I don't even know if I'd give the teacher a chance to explain themselves. I wouldn't even go if I'm waiting in the parking lot. Like I'm going to make the sheriff.
Explains enough for me.
Right. Like I'm going to make the sheriff act. Like I want you to be the one that arrests me out of all people in this scenario. Like I want you to be the cop who walked over and prevented the guy from having his child do some kind of sexual act on a middle-aged school teacher. Like it is so angering, and I wish my voice was better because I would be a bit more fired up. You could hear me, hear me roar. But man, dude,
I know it's nice to be the one with the silky smooth radio voice. I'm not going to expect it to continue, but I like it today. That's crime. If the cops aren't going to deal with it, the community should. That's how I feel.
I think that's the only way. I don't, and here's the thing, I don't think I would, 99%, X the funny meme, doubt that anything happens of this beyond possibly the teachers getting reprimanded, possibly maybe even some fines. I don't think that they have the balls to arrest, what would that be? Like it looks 4, at least 5 tenured teachers all at once. I don't think that district has the balls. I don't think the cops and the law enforcement in that district has the balls, but let them prove me wrong. I hope that they prove me wrong. But given the fact that it's been so normalized, go ahead, my bad.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say the problem is leftism destroyed policing, took over education, and also is openly pushing pedophilia. They want to normalize it. They want it to be a sexual preference. They don't want people discriminating against these people. So all that combined, I don't think anything's going to happen. But I think there was a lot of work put into nothing being able to happen.
And the thing is, though, too, because you're saying the community should get involved, and that's what makes me the most sad is like, I think at the most they'll pull their kids out of the school. But it's anything, I'd
love to see that.
And then that would be good. I mean, that's a good step, right? And I'm not going to sit here and
start
and try to encourage people to commit violent acts against these teachers or anything. But man, if it was my kid, like I can only give you my feeling.
Yeah, don't go commit violence. But if that was my kid, I'd be happy to commit violence.
Yeah, and I parent that thought because in that moment, and you got to think too, like a school like this would have police on site. At least one officer, 2, someone who would at least, I would imagine, even being at the door, especially if you're having an event like this, because when have you been to a high school football game that didn't have 2 sheriffs, standing at the gate, monitoring the traffic? It's just a common thing that happens. So I want to know what officer was here at this date who chose to say nothing. And if there wasn't an officer, I'm wrong and I'll take that. And so, correct me if I'm entirely wrong. But to think
well, I mean, those kids, I guarantee those kids have to sign a permission slip if they want to go on a trip. I bet they have to have a permission slip signed if they watch a certain kind of movie. But somehow licking the feet of an adult doesn't require informed consent from the parents.
Yeah.
Taking them to see the fire station requires informed consent. Showing them Biodome in high school requires informed consent. But not licking between the toes of their teacher, that doesn't require any kind of consent from parents. That's insane.
Yeah, that's
absolutely fucking crazy.
But that's what I was going to say. Like, this is the normalization we've got to, because sex in all of its avenues is just, it is so incredibly normalized to the levels that you have some parents who just don't even see anything wrong with this. They don't. And honestly, like, the part that honestly seriously sent me, is when I read that it was 9th through 12th graders. Now, of course, there's going to be some kind of weird ad on the screen here. Let me go back to it. But a 9th grader, the average age of a 9th grader is around 14 to 15 years old. That is well below the age of consent in nearly every state. I think all states. And it's just like, I think charges got to be pressed. I don't care who presses them. Like, I want to see charges pressed. Like, these people are sex offenders. I want to know who put this event together too. Like, who signed off on this? Because they need to be charged with conspiracy to exploit a minor. Like, this, you have got to take hard stances on these things. And the reality is, though, the issue is the fact that this exists on the right. We have people who are trying to normalize the transgenderism movement on the right, with people like, and I get it, because Blair White's politics are very, very poignant and accurate, but there's still, we cannot accept none of it. And now you have people who are at CPAC, like Lady MAGA, and honestly, I'm going to show these people, like, we need to see Lady MAGA. And I keep getting the application error. I'm wondering if they're trying to shut that story down. Let me go here. So many people aren't familiar with this person, but they were at CPAC this year. And if you're watching me follow on screen, if you're just listening, I'm sorry, but you're about to see another absolute clown man dressed as a woman. Let's see. I think the name is literally just Lady MAGA. I would like to find that account. Is it MAGA Lady? Man, of course I'm not going to find one of these top ones. Actually, no, I think it's this one. Yeah. What do you see wrong with this image right here? Does that look like a woman to you? Maybe to an idiot. That is a man. But this is who the right is accepting. So you might want to sit here and get as angry as you want to that these things exist. But until you can, corral the right and the MAGA movement to be a bit more socially conservative, this transgender crap, this normalization of minors being sexualized is not going anywhere. This stuff has got to go. And maybe you have some nuance in that opinion, Donny. I don't know. Do you disagree with anything I said there?
No, I'm just wondering how organic it is, right? That this person is claiming to be a right-wing drag queen that's getting propped up. I wonder if there's any kind of artificial foul play in that. Blair White I struggle with a little bit, because I don't she's at least putting in the effort, right? Like, I'm not big on using pronouns, but I can at least understand what pronouns I should use for Blair White. I get it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
You have these transgenders that are like, oh, I grew my hair out a little bit. Like, you still look like a dude. You're not putting in the effort. Why do you expect me to, right? Blair puts in the effort. She understands that she has a mental illness. She's not saying that she's a real woman or calling you sis. So, like,
yeah,
I think she does have a mental illness. But as far as like the people that have it and how they're managing it, she seems to be doing pretty well. But this guy in his wig, like, it's just silly.
He's wearing prom
I don't think
gear.
there's anything inherently right wing with denying reality. I don't think you can be right wing if you're denying reality.
Right.
Right. And like I talk about loving gay people all the time. I'm a big fan of the gay community. I have several family members that are in it. They're not the crazy ones, at least not as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But you know, like my brother is a man. He can love another man. I believe that to be true. This person, no matter how much money they take from taxpayers to get this surgery, will never become a woman. It's just not true, which is my problem with it.
And
You know
that's
what's
why.
also I think is
Okay, go ahead.
interesting? You know, if you know anybody that has schizophrenia, like they have delusions. We all know that. It's
Right.
part of being schizophrenic. The worst thing that you can do to those people is confirm their delusions, right? Like, could you imagine if I'm hanging out with my schizophrenic friend and he starts saying, oh, the CIA's put bugs in the wall, and like if I don't organize all the metals in my house, they're gonna come kill me. Like, if you were like, oh yeah, let's affirm that delusion, you're hurting that person, right? I
Right.
see it the same way for these people. They're having a delusion. You need to say, hey, everything's okay, but this is not happening, right? Like, you can't be
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, no, you're a lady. You're hurting that person. You're encouraging them to hurt themselves or somebody else. Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
And
And it's not true.
and to put the just the gay community aside, because I know we disagree on that, but to go to just your point, which is no amount of money, no amount of of even divine intervention is going to turn you into the woman that you want to be. And you're really accurate with your point with Blair White, and I struggle with Blair. But again, we should honestly clarify, Blair honestly more closer aligns as a libertarian than she does a right winger. But when you look at Blair, versus when you look at this dude is doing the caricature of what he believes a woman is. Where Blair is actually like, she presents as a woman. There's nothing really that you can say or like it's like trans about her when you look at her. But when you look at a dude like this, I see uneven makeup. It looks caked on. It looks bad. Like a pearl necklace. It's over the top. It's this Dolly Parton prom queen, Texas, superstar haircut with a big bow. And on top of the bow, she's wearing like a princess tiara thing. And it's so over the top delusion that it's just like, why are we accepting any amount of this? Like, I don't want to make this person hate themselves. I don't want to make this person feel that they are entirely excluded from having their voices heard. But my gosh, exactly what you said. I'm not going to sit here and be like, dude, man, the CIA's knocking on the door just because I want to make my friend happy. And I'm of the Christian belief where if you were to truly love someone, you love them with the truth. You love them with honesty. You love them with doing things that you believe and know to be the best things for them. And I do not think affirming this person's mental illness is the best thing for them, nor do I think in the short term or the long term it benefits them at all. But it comes back to the fact of like, if we want to complain about the normalization of the sexualization of children, we have got to start being harsher with what we accept through adults. If we accept this kind of stuff with adults in the most absurd fashion, then it's no wonder that kind of bleeds into all of the other areas. Where if this Leda MAGA dude is okay and all up and all good and good homies with the MAGA community, well then can you expect that same person who's good buddy with Lady MAGA USA can be concerned with what they see in the video of kids licking those toes? Like, no, because it's all baby steps, grains of sand in a big heap of normalizing what can be sexualized and what can't be. And I just find it so disheartening. It's like we are fighting like so many battles on so many fronts. And it just feels like pointless sometimes, but you can't give up. And it just,
It's definitely not pointless.
No, I don't think so either.
And you got to feel good. Like, we're the Rebel Alliance, right? Against the Empire that has infinite resources. And we're we're fighting back, and it even looks like we might be winning.
Yeah.
And they've put millions, if not billions of dollars into shutting us up or trying to get us to have the right opinion that they want us to have. We're still not doing it. So I'm kind of white-pilled about the whole thing. The fact that they spent all this money and used all these resources and had all this time to plan, because this plan goes back a lot farther than most people know. You can go read the book, The New World Order. You can go listen to Yuri Bezmenov. You can go, watch Paul Harvey talk about the devil and how he operates and how he's taking over society. Like, the plan has been long in progress, and they've put a lot of work into it. They had a lot of genius minds on it, I'm sure. They put a lot of money into it, and they're still losing because people like us,
Yeah.
you can't get us on board.
I mean, and this is going to be on a tangent, but the way that you kind of just frame that argument, you might have seen this clip because Michael Knowles is on the Whatever podcast a little bit ago, where he argues that because no amount of feminist indoctrination is ever going to truly combat the biological nature of a man who just doesn't want to be with a promiscuous woman. And I see this like in the same light, like no matter how much they want to astroturf and artificially propagate these insane ideas, it can't compete with natural law or reality. It will lose every time. And that is a white pill. I agree. I am very just keen to getting black pilled because these things are just so egregious. And like the black pill is more so in the fact that I feel like the lightest slap on the wrist is going to occur to these people. Like they're still going to have a job. They're still going to be able to like continue, because imagine but put yourself in the mind of one of these teachers, right? You would have to be some level of sociopathic to let a minor lick your feet, right? Like you would have to be some level of deranged or crazed and not hold any tenet of value of protecting kids to let some random kid that you were a teacher to do that to you. And that's what I'm a bit more black put on, is it's like, there are so many of these people who I just see it as evil. Whether they are repentant of it or not, I just see it as like, it's not even just them are doing bad things. Like it's just evil. And that's just something hard to just kind of, reconcile with, because then that changes the way you kind of got to confront and go into conflict with these people, which is like, I'm not just fighting someone made a bad decision. I'm fighting a teacher who is well aware of what it takes to protect children and actively defying everything that goes against it. For what benefit? Because he wanted some kid to because he wanted to feel good. Like I can't even, complete the thought in my head without defaulting to like, you have to be a disgusting person.
To let a 14-year-old suck on your toes, I would agree with that. You have to be a disgusting, vile person. That's not just a normal bad decision in my mind. I agree with you. That's evil. I mean, I can see getting blackpilled by this specific situation, but I also think you're probably getting blackpilled more than me, because you have to do all the back end shit for the show. You have to get people to follow on Twitter and check out the show. And Twitter is full of black pills. It's rough. It's tough out there.
It's intense.
But overall, man, we're putting up quite a hell of a fight for being an underdog in this situation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which ultimately, to me, is pretty white pilling.
And and that's why I agree. I think in the macro we are white pilling. That's why I thought it was cool, because you probably saw it too on Twitter. Like Ian Miles Chong. Let me actually go ahead and pull this up, everybody. Ian Miles Chong, which I mean, I don't really care for him. But let me go ahead if I could find his tweet, because this one tweet he had actually kind of really made a good point about wokeness entirely and about us winning the fight, as he would say. So let me kind of scroll through here, because I'll know it as soon as I see it. Because 2 videos went viral on X amidst all of this social environment. It couldn't have been that long ago. Forgive the rapid scrolling. I know it's somewhere on here. But it goes along with what we're saying, which is, wokeness is losing. And It's the two videos, and I'll explain them while I'm trying to look for it. Is the one is Sydney Sweeney going on SNL, while the other is a man who is using a pair of ladders as like an extension of his legs. So two, and then there's this video as well, which is this it's this country girl singing, it went viral. And it like there's a seemingly a resurgence of, you know, what would be, as the left would kind of consider it, white supremacist material. Here we go, right here. Man, Ian Miles tweets way too much.
Just because they would consider it that doesn't mean we should call it that.
Right. And so, well, I was just kind of clarifying by their definition. But you can see in these videos, and I hope the sound's not playing. But
well, yeah, I get it, but let's also remember that we don't want to use their definitions, because a couple of white girls, you know, fully clothed singing shouldn't be white supremacists
right.
at all.
No, I agree.
These are the same people that tried to convince us the OK sign and milk were racist. So let's not listen to them.
Yeah. But you know, what are these things? And what do these things have in common? They're stereotypical white woman, stereotypical white dude. Well, I mean, maybe less so stereotypical white dude, because the stereotypical white guy nowadays is a very pudge, sad motherfucker.
What is the stereotypical white guy?
It's a sad chud corporate pencil pushing dude. Unfortunately, that's really where the yuppies.
Got a fanny pack, New Balances, them high socks on.
Yeah, yeah, that's a discussion for a different day. But it's it's cool because this tweet really just points it out. Like, wokeness is so finished. Those two videos are the most viral across TikTok and X this week, and it shows that, like, again, it doesn't matter how much you want to astroturf stuff. People are going to naturally and align themselves with what they feel intuitively to be okay, to be good, to be morally right. And it is a white pill, because, yeah, you would imagine, you know, if this happened maybe 7-8 months ago, I would be seeing 30 threads about why anyone who likes Sydney Sweeney is actually like a racist, and they just deeply hate black women because how could anyone find Sydney Sweeney attractive? Like, and I would see those threads, but they're non-existent. And so it's a good sign that shows that people are, as minor as the resistance may be, fighting back against these ideas. And now we're kind of neutralizing the playing ground. So where it doesn't have to be radicalized content nonstop.
I argue that the resistance probably isn't as minor as you think, right? The resistance like us, where we're willing to show our faces and talk about our opinions, that part's probably pretty minor, but those are the shepherds, right?
Yeah.
Like, those are the people that are kind of playing with the ideas. The thing about this is the resistance is normal people. And no, are those people going to risk their jobs, put their faces on camera? Probably not, but they do still have power, and they are still on our side. And I would say that the resistance is probably the majority, while the left is telling you it's the minority, right? Like, look at the Bud Light boycott. That's normal people using their power. Like, and it's not the same as how we're doing it. They're not putting their face on camera, but that's the resistance too.
Speaking of, what was your thoughts when Joe Rogan and Kid Rock both said that anyone still boycotting Bud Light are losers?
Well, I mean, if Bud Light sent me a big fat fucking check, I bet I'd, you know, maybe I'd be like, oh, maybe they're not so bad, guys. They just gave me a few $1 million. You know, maybe their beer tastes like shit, but maybe you could drink it anyway. You know, like they all got fat payouts. Like the Shane Gillis thing, I get. The dude just likes Bud Light and was pumped about it. But just because he's the sponsor now, that doesn't mean I'm gonna go drink that shit.
Right.
You know,
and I don't view him entirely right wing either.
No. Well, and then, like, you know, you've got like Trump Jr. coming out and saying, oh, well, you know, there's good people that work there. I'm sure they are. I'm sure there are. But I'm also so sick of hearing, like, come on, guys, it's an American company. It fucking isn't.
Yeah.
It just isn't. They got bought out over a decade ago. So, like, of course, the people that got fat checks are saying, hey, guys, start drinking it again. You know, I want a second check. but I didn't get a fat check. So as far as I'm concerned, that whole fucking company can go down. I'm not a big drinker, but I haven't bought anything under the AB flag since that whole thing.
Same, exact same here. I used to actually like be one of those guys who I was so indifferent about the alcohol I drank that I'll give me a Bud Light, dude. Like, I don't care. It's crisp. I know it's probably going to be decent. So like, just hand it to me. But now it's like, no way. Like, not a chance. And, you know,
It's a beer you can go anywhere. You know they have it. You know it's cheap anywhere. Like it makes sense why people were drinking it. But I, as far as I'm concerned, all of these companies that do any of this shit, I'm happy to see them die. I'm happy to see Disney die just as much as I'm happy to see Bud Light die.
yeah.
You know, if Coke wants it next, I'll be a Pepsi person. If Pepsi wants to go woke next, I'll be a Coke person. You know,
Yeah.
I'll use my money all day to destroy your business, and I hope other people do too.
Well, honestly, I want to go back to that about the brand loyalty. What I was, the only caveat I did want to say is part of the reason why I believe Donald Trump Jr. walked back his sentiment with the Bud Light stuff is because even though they're not an American-owned company, they do hold a lot of American jobs, particularly like in the Missouri area, where they do have, I believe that's the biggest Anheuser-Busch facility. So I do, my heart goes out to those who are working a normal position, who had no say in the, you know, the advertising and the debacle that occurred, who are now suffering the fallout for it. The same goes for the Bud Light drivers who obviously didn't put their mouths or put their cosigns on that. So I don't want to say, you know, a big F you to all Bud Light people who work there. I understand that you're probably suffering and that you're probably facing pay cuts, but I hope that instead of you getting mad at people boycotting, you get mad at the company who decided to bomb yourself out of business and not the people who chose to stand up for themselves. But going back to brand loyalty, you know, that's something I've always struggled with my entire life with people, which is like, I've never been someone who's like, I have to have that brand, or like, I have to have like this specific kind of something. You know, I'm a kid who grew up off of Aldi's, and half the time, if it wasn't Aldi's food, it was just like gas station wraps that it was unlabeled. So I'm a kid who never really cared. I find it easy to switch brands, right? Like, I'm very easy to be like, okay, I'll make my own beer. You know, who cares if it tastes like Trick Crash?
Yeah, I mean, there are brands that like I am loyal to and have always been. Like, I've been wearing the same brand of sneakers since I was 17. I wear Fallens. It was a brand started by Jamie Thomas. He started like Zero Skateboards. That's another brand I'm loyal to. All of my skateboards are either Zeros or Mysteries, which is an offshoot. There are brands that I have loyalty to, but like you think your shitty beer, your lousy beer that we all agree it's not good beer. Like, you don't get to have my loyalty with a mediocre product and evil politics, right? And the other thing is, the reason that these companies are going woke, like what they think is going to happen, right, is we're in a time in history where we're about to go through one of the biggest transfers of wealth, right? So they're trying to adjust their political views not to the people that have the money now, but to the people that they think are going to have the money when those people die, right? So they're not doing this to market to their current customers. They're doing it to try and get the new ones that are going to have all the money when the boomers die. They very much.
Well, I was going to say, wasn't that the I'm forgetting her name, but the marketer who went ahead and signed Dylan Mulvaney? Wasn't that her entire motive? Was that she wanted to get like even underage people into drinking? Like, the ad was targeted to even 18, 21-year-olds? Because, no, that's what it was. It was because the average age of Dylan Mulvaney's audience was around 15 to 16 years old, which put into question why that person would become the ambassador, implying that Bud Light was intentionally marketing this beer to underage buyers, which that entirely is just like, that's a negative externality, dude. You do not need to be pushing that onto young people.
I mean, if I hired the Wiggles be the face of my vodka company, people would have questions, right? Like, why the Wiggles? Like, the
Fruit
people that like the
salad.
Wiggles are children. Like, so I get it. I don't think they specifically came out and said we want to target underage drinkers, but like, if you hire the Wiggles to sell your beer, you're kind of making a statement about who you want to buy your beer.
Yeah. And maybe that is the fact that they were expecting, instead of the negative pushback that they got, maybe they were expecting that the culture was going to once again become decadent, fall to fall to like the seventh ring of hell from the sixth, and that the culture was all going to widely accept that, we should let kids drink earlier on. Honestly, why do we even have these laws? Bring the drinking age to 16. Because, we're bringing in all of these things where, like, minors can consent to sex changes at 16. Why couldn't they drink? And so it's all in this aim to for some reason to exploit children. Like, why?
I personally don't think the idea was, let's get them drinking at 16. The idea was, let's get that brand loyalty in them young so that their first beer is one of our beers.
I mean, I'm going to actually look this up. I believe the average age of a first
I'm also
drinker.
thinking that they think they're appealing to the younger generation that is going to be beneficiaries of this giant wealth transfer. But I think they've convinced themselves that the younger generation is more progressive than they actually are turning out to be. So I kind of think they're advertising to fucking nobody, personally.
Yeah.
Because the Zoomers are turning out to be a little more based than we were being told that they were going to be.
Well, that's what's crazy is I think they weren't expecting that. And I think that's why everything's kind of, backfiring on them, is the fact that they weren't expecting so many kids from Gen Z to go so edgy and so extreme that they would actually, go back to the right. And so I bring this up.
This goes back to my intro, though. Force is met with resistance. When you force things on people, they're going to want to resist you. Me even being the kind of guy that says, I love the gay community. They've forced that shit on me so much. I'm so fucking sick of it. Like, get the rainbow flags out of my video games. Like, get the transgender flag out of the video games. I was playing a racing game recently. You have to go through like 15 different iterations of the LGBT flag before you get to country flags. And then you have to go through about 50 of those before you find the American flag.
And the American flag is like, you have to pay for it. It's like 99 cents if you want the American flag.
Yeah, you got to give reparations to get that one.
But it's a good thing you bring that up too, because it shows like there's no safe avenue. Like every single institution has its wokeness tentacles on it a little bit, and gaming is an egregious example. Like you have things like with Starfield, you have a game that was just it's getting promoted to the highest of the extremes. Like it's going to be this huge blockbuster game, and then it comes out and it falls flat. It's a dry game. There's not much to do. It's lifeless. It all has like the transgender ideology is rife through it, where everyone's kind of this, analogous. They all kind of look similar. There's no hot women in it. Like, they do all of the things that Gamergate would tell them that their game was going to be. And people hate it and they can't stand it. And now it's cool because you're seeing gamers fight back, like with the Fable trailer releasing. And they're like, look at this. Another main character who's female, who's ugly as crap. I don't want to play this game. Like, make women hot again. And you have it with the Lara Croft games too. People wondering, like, dude, the most memorable thing about Lara Croft that any young boy can remember about ever seeing a game cover is the fact that she is soaking wet in a tunnel and her boobs are pointed directly at the front of the cover. Like, but they're taking all of these things. They're castrating all these masculine elements out. But honestly, that's why I go to say, like, I think wokeness is inherently effeminate. I think it has to be from, it is inside of the genocracy. because it operates by a consensus-based motive. Like the mob determines what is good. And that by definition is whatever the mob consensus is what is okay. And me and you and everyone in the audience knows that what is okay can change on a day-to-day basis, depending upon the whims of the wokeness of the shepherds and the bureaucrat and the deep state, however they bend that will. And it's just sad to hear, even in a racing game that's directed entirely towards men, I can't imagine many women play racing games. There is iteration after iteration of LGBT flags. Then you have a diverse range of countries. Like, I'm sorry, when you go to NASCAR events, do you see many people besides white people there? No, you don't. Racing is like a very American, it's a very stereotypical, like white kind of sport. It's like a white entertainment type thing. And so again, it draws into the question, like, why is there Nigerian and Zimbabwe flags in this racing game? I can't imagine they would go to these lengths to add all of this stuff in when there's no audience for it. But that's the gig, is what you had said earlier. Like, there is no audience for it. They're pushing it no matter who's going to take it, because that's the agenda. It has to be everywhere all the time.
Yeah. I think one of the reasons that, leftism is inherently effeminate, like you said, is one, women, right? They tend to be more idealistic and less practical. They tend to vote emotionally, so that makes sense. The other thing, though, is I'm guessing to a effeminate man that conservatism is probably kind of intimidating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's filled with hyper masculine men. One of the first things we always say when somebody joins our side is, get them a set of dumbbells and a hug and welcome them to the crew, right?
Lifting weights is inherently right wing.
Fitness now is just inherently right wing and white supremacist now, as far as they're concerned. But I just mean, like, I think that maybe we should open up our arms a little more to these effeminate men. I'm not talking about men wearing dresses, but like, there are men who, through very little fault of their own, just are probably never going to be that masculine, right?
Yeah.
I have friends like that. It doesn't matter what they do. They're just going to kind of not nail the masculinity thing, and that's okay. Not all of us can be super hyper masculine, and personally, a lot of guys that are super hyper masculine, I don't really want to spend time with those guys. So, I think if we were a little bit more forgiving on some of those qualities that those guys maybe didn't choose to have. I mean, not all of us can sound like you, right? Like, no, even myself as a fairly masculine man, there's no way that I'll ever sound, like you do, right?
Right. It's just a gift from God.
It is what it is. Yeah. You got that golden radio voice. It's a gift for God. It's probably not great that we're talking about it today, because you kind of sound like you're
wheezing,
going through puberty with all those voice cracks. I feel really bad for you.
It's all good.
But I think maybe if we don't demonize those effeminate men so much, maybe we can, help them instead of just say that they're the problem.
I see what you're saying, and I can agree with that too. Which is, like, for one, like, you have to make sure your messaging's palatable for it to be heard. Because if it's not, there's literally no point in even trying to or attempting the message if it's not palatable whatsoever for the person you intend to reach it, to get it across to. I guess where I kind of differ from this is the fact that I kind of view this more so the fact that there are clearly things, whether they're propagated institutionally or not, particularly in, like, our food supply, that I think is literal poison. Like, I think there are things that are actively happening that are draining the testosterone levels out of everyday men. And I think that plays a huge role into the fact of why there are so many effeminate men, not even because they choose so, but because their biology couldn't make them into the men they were supposed to be, because they consumed poison their entire lives. And maybe that's by the fact of their school told them 3 square meals a day with 100 snacks in between, boost your metabolism, and that's entirely wrong. Or maybe it's by the fact of, like, their parents didn't really have a good grasp on what it is to be healthy and fit either. So they kind of just went along with it too. And next thing you know, you have the pudgy yuppie who's like, well, yeah, I'd like to go to work today, man. Like, you know, and I can't even do the good voice because my voice is so bad right now. But you kind of get, and it makes me sad because I view it from the perspective of, I don't think, you know, most men, and I don't want to say this to sound like I'm an arrogant prick. I don't think, you know, most men can come to levels that me and you were at, where we're growing full length beards. We go to the gym. We hold our masculinity like outward. Like no one looks at us at any point and is like, man, like that guy must be, a coward. You know, like it's just like, it's a hard thought to have when you look at someone like me or you. It disheartens me because I believe that all men are capable of reaching some full level of masculinity that would be worthy of leading a household, would be worthy of leading a family. And I think it's not even just their personal choices. It's like maybe by proxy of the food they eat prevents the brain chemistry from ever being fully developed to what it should be.
Well, we're under attack, right? We're being feminized by physically, by the way you're talking about. There's clear drops in testosterone. You can go look at the statistics. It's likely due to the food we're consuming. They're trying to feminize our cultures, right? We talked a little bit about punk rock and how it was feminized by that emo wave, and encouraged painting your nails and wearing eyeliner and things like that. So I mean, we're under attack, men specifically, but also masculinity is a little more complicated than just, oh, look at us, we have beards, we go to the gym. Because
right.
A lot of people look at me and they're like, oh, he's probably super manly, but you could still catch me with a tiara on playing tea party with my girls. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to see kind of like a balance, honestly, like, because we talk a little bit about how you should be a warrior and then you should learn how to control that and be a gentle warrior. Yeah. And I think you need to do that. And I think if a guy maybe doesn't go to the gym, he's can't grow a beard, like, if that guy's running his family the way he's supposed to, then good for him, man. It's hard to do that these days.
Well, I think that is masculine.
So I don't want to just focus on the external stuff because, to me, it's just as masculine. I throw axes competitively. That's just as masculine as me being able to put on a tiara and have a tea party.
Oh, 100%. We need to reframe it though. We reframe it in the fact of you're bold enough to wear the tiara with your girls because you don't care what someone's opinion is. Because you understand that it's the connection you have with your daughters. Like no one else matters in that situation. It is the fact that I am 100% my daughters, and no amount of social peer pressure is going to make me do anything different than give my entire entity to these girls. But we need to reframe that. It's that's boldness. You are unashamed to do these things because you know what it means for your daughters. You know what it does to help be a role model in your daughter's life. I entirely agree. Yeah, I was going on the external bits because we've essentially been talking about a lot of external, effeminate traits. And I just kind of see that in more so as an aspect of it's one of the first noticeable things, right? It's very easily noticeable when someone has a clear lack of testosterone. That's not to say that they lack the capacities of running their household the same way, you just had explained. I just think if I can see it, you're wearing it on your sleeve, that you're clearly not working out, you're clearly not putting yourself in the best position. I hold that to the standard of not the aesthetics of it. I hold it to the fact of I can clearly see you would physically struggle carrying your wife out of a burning building. I can clearly see you would physically struggle fighting off even one attacker. So I understand obviously the beards and those are the masculine aesthetics to the presentation of it. But it's more than that, right? There's a clear feeling of protection when you're looking at a normal standard dude who weighs 200 pounds and is the average fitness versus one of these yuppies who doesn't go to the gym at all and his gut sticking out through his t-shirt. I'm viewing that in the same aspect that you're viewing it from your daughters, which is how do you feel comfortable with yourself at knowing at any moment if anything were to happen you would be failing your wife and your family? That's the way that I view these things.
Yeah, I just brought it up because I want men to know there's more than one way to be masculine, because there is. And I do agree with you. You should have some kind of level of fitness. You should be able to protect your family. But day to day, as a guy that has a family, very rarely am I fist fighting for them.
Right.
Can I? Yeah, I used to do it a lot. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Hence the name Donny Brooks.
Yes, sir.
But most of the day, most days, my leading my family has nothing to do with that. I have that in me if I need it. I'm glad I have it in me, and I'm sure they are too. And my wife's seen me had to use it once or twice, and I don't like that she's had to see that, but I like that she knows I'll do it if it's necessary.
Mhm.
But I also don't want guys to think like if you are, not naturally built in a way that's considered masculine, you can still do what you need to do, right?
Yeah.
You know, Colt made us all equal, they say. So if you can't fist fight, carry a gun.
Yeah.
Better if you do both. I think you should do both.
It's like the
But
float
I
like a
also don't
butterfly, sting like
necessarily
a bee.
agree with. Sorry, what was that?
I was like, it's like the float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Muhammad Ali.
Well, and I just fundamentally I disagree with a lot of kind of the red pill manosphere's idea of masculinity, like go out and fuck a bunch of ladies and
Yeah. Oh,
party
yes.
and
Yes.
there's just a lot of things that I think are being called masculine that I don't consider necessarily masculine.
Well, yeah, let me be clear. Like, I almost entirely disagree a lot with what the red pill's solution is. I agree with a lot of what they deem as being problematic, though. And that's the real issue. Like, that's why they get so many views. That's why the red pill movement is so alive, is because they are very accurate in what they deem to be causing many of these issues. It's their solutions being, well, just make millions of dollars and never commit to one woman and don't worry about having kids and settle down when you're 45 years old and you can, and it's so far rooted from anything that's biblical, anything that I hold to be belief of like what you should be as a father, as a leader, as a man. And it's sad and it's disheartening because that they are getting so many kids, so many dudes to ride that wave. And the reason being, though, is because you had a generation of kids who sat there and took it and wondered why all these females were being given higher status, higher treatment, why they were not hitting any of their problems heard, why they would go to school and they would see 14 different town bicycles when 10 years ago it would have only been 2. And then everyone telling them like, oh no, you just hate women. And finally being fed up with it enough that you have people like Andrew Tate, Jay Waller, the Whatever Podcast, Fresh and Fit. They blow up instantly, huge pages, Pearl Davis, millions of followers because there's an audience who has been dying to tell them exactly what they have been seeing and feeling. But the issue comes when they prescribe the solutions to these young men as to not overcome it or conquer feminism, but to rather adapt to the system and work inside of it. So instead of telling them to go against the grain and to very heavily, go through your options, hold yourself to a high standard and ensure you're making the best choices and putting yourself in a situation to not get, screwed over. They're simply telling men like, actually, this is the game that's been handed to you. You have no other options, and your best bet is to try to get the highest score in the game as possible. And I just completely disagree with that.
I'd like to make a quick observation. So I do kind of agree that they've got an idea of what the red problems are, but I do also think it's interesting that their solution to those problems is very similar to leftist solution, right? Don't get married, focus on your career, get money, be on your grind all the time. What kind of father am I if I'm working 100 hours a week?
Right.
My kids never see me. I'm providing, sure, but am I being their dad? No, I'm not. And if I basically do as much overtime as I want, but like I want to spend that time with my family. Like I don't care about money like that. I don't need millions of dollars. I can leave them a house, a little nest egg, and they'll have memories of actually getting to spend time with me instead of being like, oh, dad, yeah, he's always working, but we have
Loaded.
a lot of money,
Yeah.
right?
Well, not even
So
just
I
that
just think it's
aspect.
interesting that although they've identified the problems, they're prescribing the same thing leftism is prescribing.
Just the male
Ignore
form.
family, don't get married, focus on your career, worry about your money above all else. It's the same playbook.
And I'm glad you brought that up too. It's not even just the money. Like, think about Nick Cannon. So the other aspect is they tell these men to, like, you just have sex with as many women as you want. I mean, do you think Nick Cannon is a good father to all 30 of his kids he has with like 30 different baby mothers? Not a chance. Each, one of those kids
don't
will
think
get like one day a year, if that.
Yeah, no, there's not enough time in the world to support 30 kids and actually be a good dad to all of them. You just don't have enough time.
And but again, and that's why it's hard because, I come in, trying to fight it with the Christ pill. And, I'm split in the middle. I'm trying to go down the lines, and I'm trying to say, okay, like half of what they're saying is right, but here's the half that's not right. And trying to split the lines, but it's hard because you have a super receptive audience who is just ready to hate women at the drop of a hat. They're like, please, give me the green light. Like, give me the green light. Let me call them whores. Let me call them. Yeah, I don't want to go too far. I'll be too vulgar, and that's what you see. And it's not helping anything. It's giving all of these crazy feminists the more fodder to be like, look, these men do hate you. Look what they're saying about you. And then it's a cyclical negative loop, and they feed into each other. And it makes crazy feminists more crazy, and it makes incels more incels.
Well, we're all under attack, right? We have been for decades under attack by propaganda. And it's very easy to say, hey, those people are being affected by propaganda, and very hard for most people to see that it's happening to them, right? Like, they put a ton of resources into men hating women and women hating men and blacks hating whites and whites hating blacks. And this is all to divide us because it's a classic divide and conquer technique, right? And when you have things like Twitter, like I talked to you a little bit about this, I'm on there. I'm not extreme enough to get any attention on there. People on there are radical. That's what gets views. If you're radical, you have crazy opinions. So I find that you'll probably see a lot of people maybe exaggerating their real opinions to try and get clout, and others just completely fabricating their opinions for views.
The shock culture.
Yeah. So I mean, the women that hate men and say, like the writing off men are the same people that are men saying, well, all women are sluts, don't, get married. Like, they're all just affected by the same propaganda, just against each other. Right. And I also think that if you're watching a short clip on Twitter and you're finding that it's changing your views, you probably haven't thought about your views enough.
Yeah. Especially when it's something as like, dude, some of these videos like 10 seconds long. And it's like, dude, you really formed your whole worldview in a 10
I'm not
second
going to
video.
lie. That one made me mad.
Okay, that's where I wanted to go.
Lie. That made me mad.
That's where I wanted to go right after this.
Right,
so yeah.
Okay, good. Let's go there.
So let me go ahead and read it off for people who are probably just listening. I was going through, and I'm seeing a lot more of this content on X because I'm actually hardcore going at a lot of progressive Twitter. So I have it on screen here. I quoted this thread. I didn't realize things were this bad. Holy beep. So, oh man, I thought the lady would have blocked me. I would have been bad. I would have been able to show the tweets. So I've been seeing so much of this soft feminist, conservative Christian content because what X does is that the more you engage with people, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, it's like, oh, you must want to see more of this. So I've been seeing more of it. And by proxy of that, I saw this absurd tweet thread with two of these progressive women who are self-proclaimed Christians who are talking egregiously about how a man's duty to protect his wife. But it would make more sense as I read through this. If you see it on screen, for those listening, in biblical gender role teaching on self-sacrifice, the man's role to take a bullet is almost always imaginary. Meanwhile, the woman's self-sacrifice is very real constant, and genuinely benefits others. She cooks, does laundry, dishes. He imagines being an action hero. And she quoted a thread from a woman, she goes by Dr. Laura Robinson. And she's quoting, and it's a long thread, I'm not going to go through it, but she breaks down essentially that she finds it laughable that men should be honored in their duty of, this ethic and this value that they are protectors. And they're essentially arguing that the protector role is nearly non-existent, and the fact that it would ever happen and that this situation would ever occur is just like, come on, like that never happens. Nobody gets shot here. No women are ever under attack that a husband would have to attend. And it is just so mind-numbingly feminist. Like, how do you get to these positions? How do you not read the news? I mean, I can only imagine these women don't read the news, because Donny here, who's here with me, sees my quote tweet, and you heard him say it pissed him off, and he immediately responds with the famous story of the Colorado shooting that happened in a theater where one of the boyfriends, and I believe it was just not one, it was two men took bullets, or was it more than two?
So the article talks specifically about a couple of men, but I believe there was 12 men that took bullets for their dates. Out of those 12 men, I think 3 or 4 of them were on first dates. So they took a bullet for a woman they did not know. It was not their wife. It was not their girlfriend. It was a girl they just met.
And that is like, and that, especially the first dates, that just shows you the biological wiring that is in men. That it is just like, even in that moment, even with this, I just met this woman, but it is danger has been presented to me, threat recognized, women must be behind me. It's just natural, and it's just unfortunate. And then, but these women go to the length to say, well, this is imaginary. This never happens. Essentially spitting in the face of any like law enforcement officer who has thrown his life away to protect somebody for the value or the betterment of their communities, trying to stop somebody. This spits in the face of any, brother in arms who's been overseas, who, even if it wasn't a woman, saw a guy who he knew he could protect in that moment, even if it knew it would cost him his life, making those choices. It's exemplified even in the Captain America movie, where the man knew he couldn't even compete with a lot of the other guys because he didn't have the masculinity that the other guys had, but he still saw a grenade that no one else saw, and still, even it didn't matter that he was getting made fun of. He knew for the betterment of those men, he was going to dive on that grenade and take it. I was right there with you, dude. Like, how do you combat such levels of delusion? And I don't even think it's delusion. I think that these women just hate men. I can't understand how you even come to these positions without at some sub level being like you have disdain for men.
Yeah, and I guarantee they don't keep that same energy for hating men, if they're put in a situation like they're on the Titanic and it's women and children first, it's very easy to hate men when you're doing it from the comfort of your own home and there's no actual danger around. But I guarantee they don't keep this same energy when there is danger around. If they were in that theater and their date was about to take a bullet for them, guess what? They would fucking absolutely let that guy get shot for them.
Yeah.
Do you think their feminism is going to say, oh, no, I'll take this bullet because I'm your equal? No fucking way. No way do they actually hold their principles as much as those men who laid down their lives for women they didn't even know.
Right.
And you'll find men saying, that's stupid. Why would you do that? That's their fucking duty, as it's yours and mine.
And what's sad is this kind of BS rhetoric is what's going to cause a man to be like, maybe I don't really care about this. And maybe you're going to cultivate a culture of men who are like, why would I get in front of this woman? Especially if you start seeding these kinds of thoughts among men that women really hold these beliefs, like they really don't respect that you protect them. They don't respect the fact that you would do that. They don't. And I get it. It's kind of funny because there's those memes all the time. Like men pick these 6 heroes and base their personality on it for the rest of their lives. And it's just like, okay, make fun of men for that. But it's because men are wired to take these positions because they desire to protect something. They desire to be territorial. They desire to have some ownership that they can be respected for, that they can take care of and be valued for what they do by defending it. And I think if you just start getting the rhetoric that this becomes common among women, you're gonna immediately start turning men who otherwise might have done that to be like, I'm not taking a bullet for this woman. F that.
Well, that's the goal, right? That was the goal with feminizing society. That was the goal with getting women to hate men. That was the goal with destroying policing as a profession. The whole goal has been to weaken the society and distance protectors from that attitude. Like,
yeah, you're right. It's just division.
The whole attack and divide and conquer isn't just to weaken us in the ways that, like, culturally, right? Like where, men hate women and they're not dating, but also to make us not want to protect people, right? That's why, what's his name? The guy on the train. Daniel Penny.
Yeah.
That's why he got arrested, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're showing you, we will punish you for protecting the people that we don't want you to protect.
Right. Same thing with Daniel Perry, Uber driver in Texas. His entire car is surrounded. There's a dude who's got an AK who's been winging it around his vehicle. Like what? And of course, it's Daniel Perry who's getting marched to court. And I don't even think Texas heard the, what was that? I think they wanted to send a pardon for Daniel Perry, but I think it got denied. And you're right. Like these people all, even if you don't want to take the conspiracy out of it, all of these continued actions is going to cultivate this super divisive hatred of all sides, of all aisles. And it's just evil. Like it's evil, making men want to shirk their natural inclined duty of protecting women and children. Like you have to be Satan yourself to be wanting to kind of push these messages forward. And I say that like wholeheartedly. Like there is nothing good about any of the messaging that's going on in any of these tweets. And the fact that I can sit here and look that it has 1.2 thousand likes is just, come on. And maybe it's AstroTurf.
Well, think about it.
Go ahead.
Think about it like this, right? Because you're saying you must have to be Satan to want men to stop protecting women and children. I think you just have to be the kind of person that wants to hurt women and children to want men to stop protecting children.
True.
And judging by leftism, it's clear that they want to hurt women and children. They want to make rape crime legal. They want to make us normalize pedophilia and act like it's just a sexual preference. They want trans men. They want men in dresses to compete in women's sports. These people do want to hurt women and children, which is exactly why they don't want you to have the attitude of, I'm going to protect the people around me that cannot protect themselves. Because the people that can't protect themselves, they're the prey.
Yeah.
They're the prey. And you're in the way. And I'm in the way. And Daniel Penny and Daniel Perry, they're in the way.
And it's just, man, it's so heartbreaking. Because it's dudes who did the right thing. And all we can really do is sit here and be like, that sucks. And that's why it's like, I come onto these podcasts and these shows with such, what's the word, like such boldness, because I'm sure you feel the same way, Donnie. Like I am just so tired of it. It is just getting to the points where it is just like, there's going to be some very, very bad consequences if we don't start course correcting as soon as possible. And I'm particularly meaning like violent things will begin occurring, especially in all the directions they're driving this division. And again, it goes back to, they want it. Women are they are who are losing out the most of all of this social wokeness. I mean, you have more single women later into their years than you ever have been. You have more women on SSRIs and drugs and birth control than you ever have been. You have more women who are admitting to mental illnesses than you ever have been, and it's all clearly an attack on the nuclear family, because everybody knows the nuclear family is the most important and crucial aspect of self-governance that exists, outside of any institution or anything. But now that they've attacked that, now they're going at, because I'm going to be honest, I think marriage as an institution and the way most families sit are really broken. And I don't think a lot of them reflect patriarchal values or biblical values. But with that being said, now they're in the position with the red pill and this feminist stuff that they are killing relationships at the inception. And what I mean by that is they're driving some of these just deep-seated hatred thoughts into the young minds of young men and young women, so that they're not even going to have any meaningful efforts when they do go to the dating market, because they've stretched these standards and these expectations so far up the wall that's when you get all of these insane moments. That's why you get all these women who are like, why would there be a problem with me having multiple boyfriends? That's why you get these crazy sayings where you have women who will be like, oh, if a guy breaks in, like, I don't want my boyfriend to kill him. And it's like, the disconnection is so real. But the only way we can honestly fight back with this is, again, it goes back to making our message palatable. You have to be sure that what you're saying, what you're trying to do, is going to be heard by the people who need to hear it. Because otherwise, you might as well scream into the void on Twitter, because that's essentially all the good that you're going to get out of it.
True. I mean, when I think about it though, like, my marriage might not really qualify as, biblical patriarchy, right? Like, we both
Yeah.
work. We largely share chores around the house. I'm honestly a better cook than she is. She cooks a lot of the day-to-day food for the kids, but like, if we're having company over, like, and she wants to impress people, I cook. There are gender roles.
Don't
Like,
let her hear you
I'm
say
not gonna
that.
have my wife out shoveling snow or cleaning gutters on the roof, right?
What? She's strong enough.
It's
She's
heavy
independent.
work. My wife's different. She's not the women you're talking about, right? She's not
Woman.
running around saying I'm a strong, independent woman that doesn't need no man. She loves me. Like, she likes me.
Right.
She knows she's not independent, just as I know I'm not independent. Like,
Right.
yeah, we both work. We both pay for the house. The chores are split up kind of how you would assume they are, gender roles. Like, I don't want her lifting heavy things. I don't want her doing dangerous chores or getting on the roof. But is it biblical patriarchy? No, probably not, but it works for us.
I mean, I would argue though, to you, like, would you not think that's probably more indicative of the fact that our economy is absolutely ridiculous, and that if you want to have a family like that, you kind of, both people do really need to be working, at least, even if she's not doing full time, she's going to probably have to take a part-time role, because the fact is, living wage jobs in the middle class are non-existent. So I don't denigrate what you guys do, because I don't view that as you're just living in defiance of biblical patriarchy. That's kind of the way that the marriage has evolved, reflective of the environment you're in, adapting to the fact that financially, this is the way it's going to have to be. Because I think if you could, with you just doing what you do right now, if you could make enough money and pay for all the bills and it wouldn't change anything of your finances, you would probably be okay with your wife not working. I would imagine you would prefer her not doing so.
I actually wouldn't. I wouldn't, which is interesting. When our kids were still young, we both took turns being stay-at-home parents, right? Whoever was just making more money at the time, you get to go to work, and the other one had to watch the kids. So we both done the whole stay-at-home parent thing. We are so much happier when we get to work. And I know, like, a lot of times these days, you see a lot of people saying, like, oh, I don't want to work, I'm not allowed to live my life. But, like, it makes you feel productive. And it's also hard to come home after a long, hard day at work to a spouse that is doing stuff around the house, but it feels like they're not contributing, and then resentment grows, and I'm at work, so she feels like I get to be out all the time out of the house, and then resentment grows there. I actually find that we're both happier when we're working and contributing. And because of the situation we're in, we don't really, our kids spend all of their time with us. It's not like we have to have babysitters or childcare.
Right.
So I don't know. I think even if we had the choice to live the lifestyle we do now, where one of us doesn't have to work, I think we'd both still like to work. I mean, we also both have jobs that we enjoy, and feel
Yeah.
good about doing. So that doesn't hurt.
Yeah. I mean, so I guess maybe our
So you're right.
relationship's just
It
different.
is a necessity, but I think it's also a preference for us
So I could
in
see that,
particular.
especially like because so here let me I guess I'll explain my situation then. So between me and my wife, like my wife like actively is like she doesn't want to work. Like she's slowly gone like as she's gotten older, as now that we've gotten married and she's become more ready to have kids, like her ability to be at a workplace is like falling away. Like she is beginning to like hate it. She doesn't want to be working. She's like, why am I working? I want to be at home. I want to be making food. I want to be cleaning the house. So I understand maybe it could be just be a pure difference of preference. But even with that, my wife would still want to keep doing her pet sitting business because she doesn't view that as like going to a job because that's something that she also likes to do. But I'm also seeing it not even just with my wife, but I'm seeing a lot of these viral TikToks coming about where these women are coming to these realizations where they're like, why did we let the revolution happen? Who voted for women's rights, And you see these videos coming more and more often.
Men did.
Exactly.
At the time, a lot of women didn't want the right to vote because at the time it came with externalities like you have to register for the draft, you have to volunteer for fire service. They didn't want it. Men voted for it. And I honestly believe most of the reason is because the whole plot was to get women in the workplace, right?
Yeah.
Because you have a culture where you're only really taxing half of the population because women are in the homes. But if you get them in the workplace, you get more work power in your economy, but you also get to tax their income as well.
Exactly. And it's wild that people like that's one of those, again, we started this show off with one of those big lies. Like that is another big lie. Like people are led to believe that the suffrage movement was like all women. It was just Susan B. Anthony marching with, 100,000 women and it was all women were behind this. And that's the harsh reality is it wasn't. It was really a split with a bunch of men.
The other harsh reality is they say it's about equality, but they actually managed to get the right to vote without those externalities. So even at its inception, It was never about equality because they got the right to vote without having to register for military service, do fire volunteering for their communities, or do any of the negative externalities that came with voting. So it was never about equality. Even at the inception, they didn't want to be equal. They wanted the rights without the responsibilities.
Yeah. It was one of the first steps in truly dismantling the entire structure of what family and society looked like a just gigantic blow to the way of life. You double the workforce, then it means you're instantly doubling the amount of constituents that are taxable, and then at the same time, what it does for the employers is it's now doubled the worker pool. You have way more options to hire people from. You're less keen on having to stick with employees because your worker pool is doubled. Now you can instead relegate people to lesser roles, split up some of the job opportunities, separate the jobs out, and then that's what you get. And then all of a sudden you have all of these jobs that were originally like living wage. Like I know it's a far shot, but dude, people used to make their living by being milkmen, and they would deliver milk around their town. But because of all of these evolutions that occurred, obviously in the name of destroying America, then hollow out the middle class, turn all of these jobs essentially into forming the gig economy, but annihilating the structure that was set and founded for a good period of time in America, which was the fathers work, the mothers are at home, the kids get to be at home, and the kids get to see mom and dad a shit ton more than what they get to now. And now mom and dad are both out of the house. The kids are either all day at school or they're with a babysitter. And now it's not even just the moms are out of the home. It's like you've completely disconnected the kids from being with their parents. And I know your guys' situation's different because you get to work remote, but a lot of people don't get to have that. And so they do have to sit and decide, like, okay, we got to get a babysitter for this time, and we got to get, make sure they're in school till this period. And if they are enrolled in this football class, that means we don't have to go pick them up until 6 p.m. And then it just says, like, they spend more of their life at a social institution that's indoctrinating them than they will ever spend with their own people that conceived them. And it's just sad.
It's sad. But I was a latchkey kid. My parents were both at work. When we got home, we let ourselves in. It's not all bad. You do learn a lot of skills that I found maybe my peers didn't learn, like how to cook or take care of yourself, the responsibility of actually getting your chores done.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want my kids being raised by another person, right? Like, it's hard enough that they go to school and they have opinions I might not agree with pushed on them there, but like, it's sad because we're both super pro nuclear family, but the way the economy is, it is kind of unreasonable to think that your wife is going to just be able to be a housewife. You have two ways you can make that happen. Either you're independently wealthy or you are downgrading your quality of life.
Yeah. To like homesteading essentially, or something along those lines.
I have nothing but respect for homesteading, for
Same,
sure.
Same. But I
it's a
was
lot of
agreeing
work.
with you because I think most people would consider like that a downgrade compared to like if you were owning your own home. But some people prefer that lifestyle.
Like an actual downgrade to your current lifestyle. Homesteading is a different lifestyle than the one I have now. I'm talking about a direct downgrade. Instead of being a 2-car family, or a 1-car family.
Okay, you just mean by pure financial.
A 4-bedroom house, we have a 2-bedroom apartment, right? I'm talking about like a direct downgrade.
Yeah. Which maybe some people are willing to take
I would
home.
argue homesteading is probably an upgrade for most people.
Yeah, no. This is what I was going to say. That's why I wanted to clarify. You're speaking more financial. Essentially going from a 100K 2-car family to a 55K 1-car family. And is it like, but maybe some people prefer that. Maybe some people would rather struggle if it would, provide them.
Builds character.
Yeah, it would build character. But if it just allows for better family orientation, better relationships with your family, like that matters more than having 2 cars and having more money. I think if you're at a point where you're really struggling and the wife is like losing her mind, every other day, she's getting anxious, she can't handle the stress, and I think it's something to look at. And maybe it is, it's going to suck taking the downgrade, but it's more important that you are more concerned with your wife and your kids than you're concerned about your lifestyle and what it provides for your kids.
Well, yeah, and you've heard me say probably more times than you need to that, I'm not interested in being rich or famous. I'm not interested in doing 100-hour-a-week grind to maximize the kind of lifestyle I could have. But as somebody that did a lot of bouncing around as a kid, not having a steady roof over my head, having to move constantly from apartment to apartment, there is a certain level of comfort that you give your children and your wife by having a stable roof over their head.
Yeah.
So although I don't think financial is the main priority, my family being comfortable is, and they are much more comfortable knowing that they have a consistent roof over their head than they would be if we had to bounce from apartment to apartment. So although I'm not pro working your whole life away to try and be a millionaire, because I don't think that's really going to change much as far as happiness goes.
Yeah.
I am for working as hard as you have to so that your family gets to grow up comfortably.
Yeah.
Reasonably comfortably, by the way. I'm not talking like my daughter gets a Tesla when she turns 16 comfortably.
Yeah.
They're going to struggle for things just like I had to. But again, that's not necessarily me putting finances first. It's still me putting my family first. Just because the downgrade does affect them. There's
Yeah.
A big difference between living in a shitty apartment and living in a nice house in a nice neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, that's goes to like stability. Like, don't downgrade if you're losing your stability. But I think it's a balance, right? Like, if you can be stable and you can drop to like a 75K and she works part-time and that benefits the relationship, it's something to look into. It's more of a matter, and that goes to people's personal finances too. Like, don't obviously take these like bulk numbers and just try to apply them. Like, it's going to take some actual budgeting and like thinking about how to orient your guys' schedule. And it's something to think about. And even homesteading too. Like, I think people should maybe even look into that if you're really kind of dying and you hate being on the grid, you hate, being involved in all of the goings on, and you feel like you have the willpower and the conviction to homestead, then go for it. I'm just somebody, stability over wealth, 100%. And I think honestly, that's a good point to kind of wrap up. We kind of talked our ways out of our news topics. Nothing to point to at the end of it.
I told you we could do a whole show just on that one ad.
I know.
We basically did.
I know. We stretched it really far too, which is cool because I honestly like this a bit more because we can freestyle it. Because this outline had probably the least amount on it that I've had in any of the outlines I've sent before. And we didn't even touch the middle section. Like, we touched the two smaller ones. And so honestly, we should just roll with that.
I think that's good though, right? Because we do cover some news, but mostly what we're doing is talking general politics.
Yeah.
Which, these people that are listening, they likely saw some of these news stories. Maybe they're coming here for their news, but it's a weekly show, so it's unlikely. I would imagine most people are coming here just to see what we think about them.
Right.
So maybe
the breakdown, the
I
commentary.
Personally, I like the shows being a little looser, with a little more freestyling and room for tangents.
Same.
I think that's when we get our best stuff, personally.
No, same. I guess I just get fearful of not being able to stretch it or keep it on topic enough to match
You're
the title.
fine with me here, brother. I am a talker.
No, right, same. And that's the thing. It's like I worry about it every time, and then I'm looking, and it's like we're at 8:17. We're well past 2 hours.
Enough?
No, we're totally fine.
We're gonna have enough, and we did like 2 hours on like a 30-second video.
No. But that also, though, too, that speaks to the fact that we're just like, we're in the sewers all the time, dude. Like, we're literally constantly absorbing this stuff to the point where we have our own really set opinions that can go like to the second, third, and fifth level of like, okay, but what about this? So you saw this here, but what about this? And, and I enjoy that too. And most people probably don't know this because we don't speak about it enough. But I mean, me and you spar in our Discord chat all the time. Like, we constantly, go back and forth with each other. And that's to say that we argue all the time, but it's like we're constantly like testing each other's thoughts on a specific instance or to see what the nuance may be. And it's cool because it's a constant, like, ever flowing, like, engagement of like, what about this information? Okay, but what about this? And so it's cool because it's constantly like making you think, keeping you engaged. And I just appreciate that because you're right. Like, there's not many people or many at all I can have this kind of conversation with. So I appreciate you coming on here, Donny, and being a part of it. You're being providential to this podcast, having a platform and having a voice. So let me tell you, I appreciate you coming on here.
I appreciate you as well. And I'm sure my friends and family appreciate it. Because the more of those conversations I have with you, the less of them that they have to hear.
I knew where you were going with that. That's hilarious. Well, no. Okay, let's go ahead and end it there. I don't want to get cut off. I set it at 8:30, so I hope we don't, the stream don't, short out on us. But so, Donny, is there anything that you wanted to close out with before we wrap this up?
No, as always, if you like anything I said, please follow Atlas, YouTube, Spotify, X mainly. Leave me alone.
Yes, I love that message. Yes, sir. Thank you for coming on, Donny. And again, I'll just repeat it. Yeah. Make sure you're following us on Spotify, subscribe to YouTube, follow me on X, share the show, all the beautiful things. And again, I hope my voice is good for tomorrow. I'll be on with Nick. We'll be going back to a little bit more Christian-oriented episode tomorrow. We'll be airing that at 7. God bless. Let's hope this country gets right. And thank you again, Donny. You guys all have a good night. Take care.